Good evening. As the beginning of the new month approaches, many people are once again struggling to pull together rent payments. And now residents who took part in the Keep Your Rent movement last month say they have been experiencing harassing behavior and intimidation tactics at the hands of their landlords. Some residents in one building in the East End says they've had their landlord go door to door handing N4 notices with a debit machine forcing tenants to pay on the spot.
I'll try.
Try your best.
If I cannot,
because you know your roof over your head is the most important.
Yeah, I'll try definitely.
Okay?
But
it's not worth crying over. This COVID is nothing.
Oh my God!
Okay?
Don't say that we're losing our family. Our family died.
This is just one interaction with the landlord at a Pinedale property building near Victoria Park and Danforth.
I know for you, money is very important.
Not for me. I'm just doing my job.
I know that.
This tenant, who wants to remain anonymous out of fear of repercussions, says the landlord came to her door demanding she pay rent after withholding April's payment. Many other tenants in the same building say that same landlord went to their doors with a debit machine demanding they pay up now after handing them an N4 notice to end a tenancy.
The Residential Tenancies Act, which is the act which governs landlord and tenant relations in Ontario, it doesn't speak directly to these sorts of situations. The landlords have, in doing so, or if a landlord was to do so, they haven't necessarily breached the act. A tenant could make the argument that this could be harassment.
Are you guys, I'm sorry, so you guys are knocking on every door in the building?
Yes, we are. Only the tenants who haven't paid.
This situation, we are mentally, physically, we are sick. And top of that, their pressure, we are really too much pressurized.
It's okay for you to go harassing people at every door?
It's not harassing, asking for what is owed.
The Pinedale property isn't the only building where residents have received N4s. Some tenants at 419 and 421 Markham Road have also been given the same notices.
A lot of people, however, see these as eviction notices and are frightened and are intimidated into paying, even if they don't have the money to survive the rest of the month.
So it's not illegal. It's not unlawful. There's an argument that the landlords could make, which is that they're preserving their legal rights, so that because notice periods are involved, these sort of time frames that have to be met, that they want to make sure that they are able to pursue these remedies after the fact, and so that's why they're doing it.
I don't have enough money to pay my money for rent, and to be honest with you, I am gonna hold the money for rent.
Last month, Premier Doug Ford announced no tenant will be evicted from their homes due to lack of payment during this pandemic. Ford had said if you can't pay, don't. However, the Premier has yet to commit to freezing rent or providing funds for tenants. The lawyer says tenants won't be arrested for not paying, but it's unclear as to what will happen once the Landlord-Tenant Board resumes. Now, we did reach out to officials with Pinedale Properties, but did not hear back by this broadcast. We'll continue to follow up with this story in the coming days.
Our Aaron Cantrell went to work to find out.
The National Multifamily Housing Council discovered nearly a third of 13.4 million U.S. renters didn't pay their rent between April 1st and 5th.
I don't think that honestly, this should come as a surprise to anybody because we've had massive layoffs and furloughs.
For now, people are okay if they can't pay their rent. Governor Holcomb has an order in place that prevents evictions from happening until May 5th. But what happens after that date? It's a question Amy Nelson, the executive director for the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana, has been asking.
People are absolutely terrified right now, but now they have to worry about the loss of their housing through nothing at all that they did.
Currently, there's no one talking about some rental assistance program on a state or federal level.
Bans on late fees, for instance, being charged during this period, or that rent can't be raised, or grace periods, to pay rent.
She's worried that starting on May 5th, landlords will be demanding missed payments and rent up front, which she thinks would lead to an eviction pandemic for Indiana.
The last few years, Indiana had made national headlines as being one of the highest evicting states in the country.
The Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana and Prosperity Indiana is also working to get lawmakers' attention. 17 housing providers and advocate groups sent Senator Todd Young a letter asking him to champion $100 billion in rental assistance.
There's estimates from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition that over 200,000 Hoosiers are going to need short-term emergency rental assistance past the time when the medical pandemic orders are lifted.
With May only weeks away, Both Bradley and Nelson hope some action is taken or Indiana will have another crisis on their hands.
Unless individuals are getting their jobs back, I don't see how this crisis is going to be alleviated anytime soon.
Reporting for Fox 59 News, I'm Aaron Cantrell.
But right now, we know for a fact that people are getting hurt in this downturn. And this is news that's coming from the organization it's the National Multifamily Housing Council and also real estate data providers. Nearly 1/3 of renters in the United States were unable to pay their rent the first week of April. That's down. It was something like 69% paid their rent compared to 81% in the first week of March and 82% in April of 2019. Let's discuss what this means, and as we go forward, I want to bring in the panel. We've got Julia LaRoche, we've got Akiko Fujita, and also Julie Hyman. Julie, what jumps out at you about this?
Well, there are a lot of questions around these numbers because we have had certain municipalities, right, that have said they are not going to initiate any eviction proceedings at this time. That's true of New York City, but it's not universal. So it's not clear now whether this will have a ripple effect and affect some families. Keep in mind, there are a lot of other numbers, right, to consider as we're talking about all of this housing data. We got mortgage applications this morning that fell by nearly 18%. So we know people are not looking at buying homes right now, which is not surprising. We also learned over the past couple of days that there has been a 2,000% surge in the number of people asking for forbearance on their mortgages. In other words, asking not to have to pay their mortgages right now. And so obviously there are a lot of people looking for some kind of relief here. The renters, some of the renters are just not doing it. I'm sure there are some folks who are just not paying their mortgages either. And then there's the question of how forgiving will landlords and banks be at this point in time?
Yeah, Julie, to add it to your point, I think we want to look several months down the line, because right now what we've got are more forgiving rules in place, whether it is, cities that are banning any kind of eviction, both on the commercial front as well as on the residential front. But we're talking about a 2-month to 3-month window right now. So what happens at the end of it? A lot of these renters, for example, they're not just choosing not to pay rent. They're doing it because they can't, because they potentially have been cut from their jobs. And so if the hiring doesn't pick up, if they don't get their jobs back, we're going to be looking at a much worse situation several months down the line when that rent is going to be due. And then what happens? And as you point out, it is a ripple effect, because landlords who are freezing their rent are doing so because they don't have to pay their mortgage right now. When renters come back 3 months later and say they can't do it, then you're looking at a much more significant sum.
Yeah, and to Akiko's point, I think you hit it right there on the nail on the head, especially when it comes to the ripple effect. And guys, I think this just goes beyond just the residential, because when you think about it, a lot of folks now have gone 3 weeks without a paycheck. Look at the initial claims number. Within 2 weeks, hitting 10 million. It's expected. We have the report coming out tomorrow. That's expected to rise again. Well, maybe not rise again, but another several million. At least that's what some of the projections are. So it's a pretty dire picture, and especially when you think about folks who can't even get together $400 in an emergency. I had a conversation with Howard Schultz 2 days ago, the former CEO of Starbucks, and our conversation did kind of talk about commercial real estate. At some point, you're going to have to see the government work with landlords to have some sort of facility to have a backstop here. And going back to this specific report, residential, they did point out just a significant number did pay their mortgage, which is also telling, just given the severity of the times that we are in.
All right. And just one thing about this, because we're going to keep an eye on this data, is that it was roughly 13.4 million investment grade units with incomes. The tenants had incomes that skew higher. It did not include, single family houses that are being rented, nor did it include subsidized housing.